The scarf came first. Cole Maddox stood in the entryway of his old farmhouse, the floorboards cold beneath his boots, the dawn still holding back on the horizon. His daughter, Juniper, tilted her small chin up while he worked the scarf around her neck. The wool was frayed from winters past, but his hands moved with care, looping it 3 times before tucking the end flat against her chest. The knot wasn't just a knot. It was the same 3-loop tie he had used long ago to cinch gear in deserts and forests, a habit carried home from places he never spoke of. For him, it was ritual, a quiet defiance against the chaos of the world. Atlas, the shepherd mix with patient eyes, sat by the door, paws aligned perfectly with the seam of wood, gaze locked on the rise and fall of Cole's chest. He never barked in the mornings. He only waited for the cue that would shift the house from stillness to motion. Juniper's freckles caught the faintest thread of light as she reached up, pressing something into her father's jacket pocket, a folded paper heart, cut unevenly with school scissors, its edges soft from her hands. "For luck," she whispered. Cole's face softened. He brushed a strand of her hair back behind her ear and echoed, voice gravel but steady. "For luck." When they stepped outside, frost crackled beneath their boots. The fields were silvered with morning light, and steam curled from Atlas's muzzle in slow, ghostly spirals, like smoke rising from an unseen fire. The day might have passed without incident, folded neatly into routine, if not for the sound that cracked the air and bent it into something else. Cole had left Juniper at school, watched her braid swing as she slipped through the door. He was halfway home when it came. The first gunshot, sharp enough to split the ordinary. Then another, echoing down the boulevard. His body froze, but his eyes were drawn across the street. A police cruiser sat skewed sideways, one door thrown open. Officer Mara Linden crouched behind it, shoulder pressed tight to the metal, blood soaking through her sleeve. Her pistol wavered in her hand. Her radio hissed with static that carried nothing. Civilians scattered, their footsteps fading into alleys, their shouts carried on wind. Atlas pressed harder into Cole's knee, steady and solid. The dog knew before the man admitted it. There was no choice. Cole slid his wallet and keys into his boot, a habit that belonged to another lifetime. Freed his hands. He touched Atlas's collar, whispered a low 2 count. The dog's ears flicked once. That was all it took. They moved. The sprint was low and sharp, a memory carried in muscle. Cole cut angles, gravel stinging up his boots, body folded smaller than a shadow. Atlas ran tight on his flank, shoulder brushing denim, not a sound leaving his throat. A bullet smacked the curb, fragments spraying his cheek. The air smelled of copper, smoke, and glass dust. Fear rose like bile, but discipline overrode it. His body had done this before. He kept running. They slid in behind the cruiser. Cole's shoulder slammed metal. Mara's face turned toward him, pale and strained. "I've got you," he said, voice rough but clear. Her pistol shook in her hand. He eased it down gently, found her wound, tore cloth from his own pocket. He looped it tight, pressed his palm down hard. Her breath stuttered. "Don't leave." "I won't." Atlas crouched low at the wheel well, muscles coiled, gaze forward, waiting for the command that never needed to be spoken aloud. Glass across the street caught movement. A second shooter. Cole tapped Atlas's shoulder. The dog's body stiffened, ears flat, a growl thrumming the air. Cole stooped, fingers closing around a stone. He flicked it into the street. The shot cracked instantly, glass shattering where the noise had landed. He marked the angle, counted the pause. Mara's eyes began to slip closed. Cole leaned in close, voice low but insistent. "What's her name? Your daughter, what's her name?" Her lips moved. He caught it, repeated it back. Again and again, words as tether, pulling her against the weight of darkness. Sirens rose in the distance, faint but growing. The minutes stretched beyond time. Cole kept his pressure firm, his voice steady as stone. "I'm here. I'm with you. Stay with me." Atlas's ears twitched at each approaching siren, measuring distance. A neighbor rushed out with a garden hose, panic raw in his voice. Cole snapped, calm but commanding. soaked the gauze. "Hand it here." Cold water ran over fabric, darkening it. Cole pressed it back into Mara's wound. A small grace, but one that mattered. The suspects wavered, their aim faltering, their confidence bleeding away with every second they hadn't expected to face. Then the sirens filled the block. Police surged in, boots and shouts crashing against the air. Weapons raised, commands barked, suspects surrendering in a storm of curses and fear. EMTs dropped to their knees beside Mara, lifting her carefully. Cole's hands were crimson. Atlas's fur was streaked with blood. Detective Hale stood apart, arms folded, gaze fixed. He saw the way Cole moved, not rushed, not frantic, but measured, precise. He saw the dog's eerie discipline, responding only to the faintest touch. He saw a veteran who had never stopped living by ritual, a geometry of courage no manual had ever written. When the street emptied, silence returned like dust settling. Cole bent to a spigot at the shop wall. Water ran cold over his hands, pink swirling into the gutter. Atlas pressed against his leg, leaning with a weight that steadied. Cole reached into his jacket. The paper heart was still there, edges bent but intact. He turned it in his fingers, then pressed it back into his pocket. The world trickled back, leaves skittering across pavement. The hiss of the hose, the tremor in his hand, he could not quite stop. At the hospital, corridors smelled of antiseptic, voices low and hurried. Cole stood outside trauma, still carrying the street on his clothes. They told him no. But Hale stepped out, voice quiet. "She asked for you." Inside, Mara lay pale, sling bracing her arm, but awake enough to turn her head. Her lips shaped thanks. He shook his head, voice steady as ritual. "We'll make it home." She closed her eyes, as though the words were enough. That night, Juniper set a folded paper star in the center of the kitchen table. Atlas curled under her chair. They ate quietly. The house carried no sound but silverware against plates, the creak of wood. No talk of blood or gunfire, just survival wrapped in silence. Afterward, she tucked a paper bird into his jacket pocket. He knelt and guided her hands through the scarf, not again, slower, steadying her fingers. Both of them learning what safe felt like when you made it with your own hands. At the precinct, body cam footage played. Cole's voice came through steady, words spoken to Mara as if no one else existed. Atlas, unmoving, responding only to cue. The stone flicked into the street. The wet gauze pressed into place. His voice repeating her daughter's name. When it ended, silence filled the room. "That dog," someone whispered. "That man." Shock shifted into something heavier. Reverence. Reporters came, cameras hungry. Cole ignored them. He walked Juniper to school. Bought 2 apples, one always for Mara. Sat on the porch in the evenings, oiling Atlas's collar until it gleamed. He wrote a note he never sent. Folded towels. Tied knots. Carved days into something steady. Mara came one evening, arm in a sling, smile hesitant. Juniper handed her the apple. Atlas nosed her palm before settling at her feet. They sat at the table, where the paper stars glowed faint in lamplight, like a small altar to survival. They spoke little. When she left, she carried a jar of Juniper's folded shapes. At school, a boy teased Juniper about the news. She tied her scarf in the 3-loop knot and said simply, "My dad helps people be brave." It wasn't loud. It wasn't for show. It was just truth. Cole stood at the gate, eyes damp, letting the moment live on its own. The commendation came without ceremony. Hale read a letter. Cole asked that Atlas stand beside him. AK, 9 officer stepped forward, pen in hand. The room hushed as it was clipped onto Atlas's collar. Mara's eyes met Cole's across the room. No speeches. Gratitude and silence. The department, once shocked, knew they had witnessed something rare. At sunset, Cole returned to the place it had happened. He knelt by the cracked curb and slipped a paper heart beneath stone. Atlas sat beside him, ears relaxed, body still. Cole whispered the 2-count cue, not for danger, but for peace. The street breathed ordinary again, footsteps, voices, doors closing. Precious in its plainness. Mara came once more, carrying a chipped mug with a small green plant. She helped Juniper with homework, stayed for soup. Later, on the porch, silence stretched. Cole pressed a key on a cord into her hand. Suppers at 7. Stories at 8. Walks at 9. She nodded. Family was not declared. It was kept, ritual by ritual. Late, the house quieted. Juniper asleep, Atlas curled and breathing slow. Cole dried a plate with the towel he always folded in thirds. Mara's hand slid over his, covering the same circle of porcelain. No vows, no speeches, just the kind of touch that carried more weight than words. The house, at last, learned their names. Some nights, the world is saved by a hand on a wound, a dog that waits for breath, and 2 people who dare to stay. If this quiet kind of courage speaks to you, if you believe in second chances, found family, and the soft thunder of small kindness, stay close. Subscribe, share, and return to the fire. There's more light to pass along.